Welcome back, everybody, to the Omniverse Comics Guide podcast. We are your Omniverse Comics Guide guys. I'm Eric. That's my pal, Dave.
Hello.
Dave, how the hell are you?
I am hell. How
Well,
are
you
you?
sound heavenly when you sing.
Oh, stop it, you.
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
It's nice June weather in Canada. We're getting some good afternoons of sunshine. So I
Mhm.
come home and able to hang out and read outside, which is great. The puppy's doing good, so I'm
Aw.
happy. And we are doing our Maxi-Series episode, which I've been excited about.
I know. Like, you're messaging me going, like, I'm pretty excited about this one. Like, what have you chosen?
You know what? It isn't even that I've chosen anything groundbreaking at all. It's more just the fun that I had reading it and like
Yeah.
thinking going ahead of like, I can't wait to read this 12-issue series now. Like there's all these options of things that I've kind of, you buy things and you put on your shelf and then you
Mm.
never have impetus to read it. You know you will, but you're waiting for like something to trigger it.
Yeah.
This was something that made me read a bunch of different things that's like, that was fun.
Mhm.
So, and some things I've never read before.
Nice. Same.
So yeah. Oh, really?
Mm.
Okay. I wonder if we have anything similar. We might have one.
We might have one.
Should we list it right off the top, or should we wait till later? See who
Well,
gets it?
you're first tonight, so
Okay.
we'll find out when we hit yours. Do you want to talk about that? What's that website that people keep talking? Everyone's talking about it right now. Have you heard about it?
Well, there's a website that people watch us on. That's
Oh.
Twitch,
Oh.
and all the folks who watch us live on Twitch, we love you and appreciate it. And if this is your first time watching, welcome. Press the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Do the same thing. Give us a thumbs up, a subscribe, and of course, omniversecomics.guide. You can get all your reading orders, your podcast, your collector item specials, whatever you enjoy about comics, you'll most likely find something there to tickle your fancy. Omniversecomics.guide.
Omniversecomics.guide. That's very easy to remember.
Thank you for reminding me.
It
You
was
are
my
good.
pleasure.
You're a good podcast partner. All right.
Last week, you introduced one of the newest member of the Omniverse.
Yes.
There is another new member of the Omniverse.
Okay.
That's Web of Omnibus, who's been creating these fantastic videos on our Instagram channels and LinkedIn. And he's done promos for the Daredevil Companion Omnibus. He's done one for Punisher Max Omnibus. They're absolutely stunning videos.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful job. They've been running on YouTube and all the other whoring out platforms, and it's just brilliant to have him on board. He's really, really excited to do more stuff with us as well. So thank you so much, Web of Omnibus, for being part of the Omniverse.
The great shout out. Shall we begin?
Let's do it.
All right. I tried this time again to do kind of the same thing with our first miniseries list, where it's easy to get into a series and you're not too bogged down by other things happening around the story.
So just to clarify, in terms of what makes our maxi-series list, what kind of categorizes something as a maxi-series, so a mini-series is generally up to 6 issues. After that, in my mind, it's anything 8 or higher as a maxi, which means 7 is technically could be like a longer mini-series. You know what I mean? So it's like, 7 could be in either. Hey, let's make it confusing. But it probably goes up to around about the 15 mark. If it's over 15, maybe 16 at a push, really. But yeah, that's what we're basing all of this on, aren't we? I mean, for the most part, a maxi series is considered to be 12 issues, but a 10-issue series is still a maxi series and not a mini series. So.
100%. I've mentioned this one before, I think on a perhaps a hidden gem. It's a 12-issue series I wanted to reread since I bought it in deluxe format, and it's always an Invader.
Oh.
From Chip Zdarsky. And what I really like about this book is that it has 2 different artists throughout every issue, and that is Carlos Magno and Butch Guice, who, if we've any of us in this chat right now have read Captain America with Brubaker, Butch Guice did some art, and he's a great artist for this.
Far back as like Micronauts as well. He was doing Micronauts in the 80s.
When he was Jackson, he went by Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson Guice, yeah.
Yeah, and he did Action Comics during like the Death of Superman era, but he's a great artist to do the flashbacks that are in this book. So they show the invaders, the friendship, the moments that they would have after a battle, different things like that, drawn by Butch Guice. But the current timeline that you're in is from Carlos Magno. So you can see where you're at in the stream of time based on the art, which I think was a clever way to balance illustration duties on this book. We've read many Avengers and Invader stories, but what's cool about this one is it takes place during the Jason Aaron era of Avengers. So it's
Ah.
somewhat of a modern era book. And there's some references to where Captain America may or may not be during moments of the book. And that's just because he's part of the Avengers in the timeline of 616. But this book, it just shows the bond that the invaders had during the war, understand like this weakness that some of them have for each other because of what they went through. And it's very much explored throughout this book. And of course, Namor is such an interesting character because he's an ally to so many people in the Marvel universe, but then at the same time, he is sworn enemies to some of the same heroes.
Yeah.
And you never know what side of the ocean he's waking up on.
No, that's true.
You know,
he's quite an interesting guy, isn't he? Because he's kind of technically been a villain in many ways so many times, even when he's had his own series.
Exactly. And they touch upon all of those sort of versions of Namor throughout this, where he had different motivations and the type of person he becomes depending on what his motivation is of that time. And I haven't read much Invaders books at all. Like I think of Roy Thomas and the Invaders, and it's not something I'm drawn towards because of its time. But this Chip Zdarsky one, I feel is always interesting to see how he tackles certain characters, whether it's popular ones or creator owned. But it's a really fun book, and it's an easy thing to jump into, and it's a 12-issue one and done series. It may make you want to read some of the other things that were happening in the Marvel universe during this time, which is always kind of like a good jumping off or jumping in point, depending how you see it. But I don't know. I'm very fond of it. And as I was reading it, I had moments where I'm like, is this as good as I remember? But I stuck with it, and I'm like, that was good.
Who's in the lineup?
Also, pardon?
Sorry, I totally interrupted you there. I just wondered who was in the
go
lineup
ahead.
apart from Namor.
So you got Cap, Bucky, Namor, you got Toro, and you got the Human Torch. Like the entire.
So is that they're all in the modern version as well?
Yeah.
So it's like Winter Soldier and
yeah.
Is Toro alive at that point?
They're all there.
Yes. Sorry,
right?
nothing. Spoilers.
No. But I mean, it's an Invaders book.
Yeah.
And they refer to some of the PTSD that Namor has from World War II. Just how it affected him and how it later like even messed up with his memories. I forget, but Namor is a mutant as well. He's not just an Aquaman of the Marvel universe. He also happens to be a mutant, and that's also addressed. That connection. What was he doing in between certain eras of his career?
Because that's the thing. The first appearance of him in the 60s in Fantastic Four, he's just got a big beard, and the Human Torch kind of recognizes him and burns his beard off. What if it wasn't him? Piss off, lousy teenagers!
Like you just burnt my beard off. You son of a
I've been
bitch.
growing that thing for 16 years.
It didn't grow overnight, you jerk. No, I'm all patchy.
My number 2, dude, is the one I think we're both going to have on our list. And the reason I'm mentioning it first isn't to nab it before you nab it. It's because there's a logic to this. So I'm just going to grab something. Give me one sec.
Logic. I'm excited.
Okay.
Show me. Okay.
Show me the money.
Show it.
My first experience of Marvel, the way I lost my Marvel cherry was through a Maxi-Series. And it's contained within this box set. Ugh.
Beautiful.
There's the top there. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't she pretty?
Beautiful.
This, as you can see, is Secret Wars if you're watching video format. Now, actually, that box set, there were some people that go like, what size are they? All oversized hardcovers. Like, no, they're just standard size hardcovers. I go, well, I don't want it. But it's lovely. So it is a smaller size book. This is Secret Wars. This is probably, quite possibly, the most famous Marvel Maxi-Series there is. Although I think at this point there are plenty of people that haven't read it. So it's very much of its time. Yes, it was, well, So you interviewed Jim Shooter, as we've mentioned several times since the interview with Jim
Yes, we
Shooter, but
did.
it's prevalent at this point in time because the way it's referred to is often like it was designed to sell toys. And actually, even though Mattel was selling the toys, the toys didn't steer the content of the series
That's
and
right.
what happened in the series. So sure, they used that title, but they didn't really have a lot of bearing on each other. And even when you look at the toys and what was in the secret shields and stuff, a lot of the stuff that happens is set on Earth. So they really didn't line it up in that way. So it's a 12-issue series, and even though, yeah, of course, if you're reading the monthly titles of the characters that appear in this series, you can see how they leave Earth and end up on the ship that takes them to Battleworld. Other than that, it does stand alone. Like, I never read those issues. I didn't read those issues for about 10 years, maybe. I just read Secret Wars. Well, it wasn't even from the beginning. I read it from like issue 4. But I read it so many times. This is quite possibly the series I've read the most. Does it sound a bit cheesy? Does the dialogue sound a little bit like, what? At times? Yeah, it does. Do you know what? Couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. It just makes me super happy. And it's great. So a whole bunch of Marvel heroes, including like your big names. And bear in mind, this is big names from 1984. So it's the Hulk, Spider-Man, the Avengers, 3 of the Fantastic Four because Sue Richards was pregnant, and the X-Men. Iron Man is a different guy under the armor, so they wanted Iron Man in it as one of their bigger characters, but it's not Tony Stark under the armor. So it's still all very much in continuity with what was happening at the time. They're all sucked off into space, where there are also some of the biggest villains in the Marvel Universe. It's a bit of a random bunch, because you've got Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, Doctor Doom, Molecule Man, Kang, the Absorbing Man, the Wrecking Crew, Ultron, Enchantress, Galactus. Magneto is also there, but he's among the heroes, which is kind of interesting because this is part of what sets Magneto on a slightly different. Well, it's not the beginning of what sets him on a different path, because that's probably X-Men 150, but even then you could argue that's not accurate either. But yeah, they take these characters off, and the Beyonder, this kind of godlike being, says that if they fight and they defeat their enemy, that he'll give them their greatest desire. So there's a purpose for them to fight, and if anything, it's like the heroes kind of the reason they're given to fight is interpreted in whatever way. So obviously Doom's going to want power. The heroes don't necessarily want power. What good is that? But the place they fight is called Battleworld, and it's a planet made up of lots of different planets from all over the galaxy, including a chunk of Earth. And from there, Doctor Doom empowers 2 more people, who are Titania and Volcana. There's a new Spider-Woman introduced in it. There's tons of fallout. Spider-Man gets himself a nice black costume.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone's heard of that or what happens to that in the follow-up. Venom. Not to spoil anything. There's just tons of stuff in here, and it's almost like the wish fulfillment thing. It's not as overwhelming as Crisis on Infinite Earth. So, the 2 are kind of compared quite a lot, but it's only because they were 12 issues and came out roughly the same time. I think Secret Wars was about a year before, really, I think. But yes,
Yeah.
it is a fun thing, and yes, some bits piss a lot of fans off, like Spider-Man beating the X-Men so easily, which pissed Chris Claremont off. But even then, I'm not going to tell you what he did. Go watch the episode with Eric interviewing Jim Shooter.
Let Jim tell
Let
you.
Jim tell it, man. It's a great bit. I love this series. This series made me love comics. I knew some part of me knew I loved comics, and I would buy comics, but I wasn't completely there. I couldn't find the thing that won me over totally, because I love drawing and I loved art. And then this came out and my world changed. So this is the beginning for me.
That's
very
awesome.
much. This is my origin story, Secret Wars.
I'm so happy you listed it. Was that the one you thought we would have?
Yeah.
It's not. There you go. My number 2. I'm not sure if you're a fan of this book, actually. I think we have differing opinions on it. It's a year 1, so it's a good jumping on point for people. It's from one of my favorite writers, and that's Justice League year 1. It's a 12 issue. It's with Brian Augustyn and Barry Kitson, who were regular collaborators with Mark Waid. What's cool about this book is, yes, it's a one and done, but it's also was coming out at the time, kind of like Brave and the Bold that Mark Waid did with, I think, the same team. But it was during a time where Barry Allen and Hal Jordan were not a part of the DC universe. They had, either sacrificed
Oh,
themselves, right? They weren't
yeah.
players on the table. So this was your opportunity to, I guess, get that fill of those two characters that are quite well known, especially in regards to the Justice League,
Yeah.
but they weren't really anywhere, they weren't published anywhere. And their replacements at that time, if you will, were quite popular. Like Wally West was doing just fine as the
He was
Flash, and
a lot of people's Flash, and Kyle Rayner was a lot of people's Green Lantern.
exactly. So this is a cool little slice of JLA, I guess, history, because they hadn't really had an origin story, an official origin story under the, Crisis or Zero After Zero Hour restarts, if you will. So there was some open space to be able to tell a story. Mark Waid is a JLA nerd. He knows the ins and outs
Uh-huh.
of JLA. And there's no Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman on the team. So how do you kind of make this an interesting book without the main three that everyone would buy the book for? And I think he pulled it off. It's very classic style comic book storytelling.
Mhm.
If if you're I don't want to say an old school comic book fan, but if you have read comics for many years and have dabbled in the 80s and the 90s stuff, you'll be able to get right into this book and understand the way that it's paneled and timed and all of these different things. I enjoyed it. I don't know if you read it and said that you weren't a fan of it,
I
but
read it and wasn't sure, but I think I bought it again recently. I bought the deluxe again about a year
yeah,
ago, and it was partly
yeah,
because we were talking about Mark Waid. So it is Mark Waid and Brian Augustine writing it, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
But also, I think I understood it differently. Just to kind of very briefly try and explain that continuity. So there's like a 5 year, roughly, gap between the beginnings of the DCU
hmm
and the
hmm
kind of Legends period. So for some, Crisis kind of happens in there, but Barry Allen was the Flash, and the JLA formed. They were already there, and then it was like, well, what didn't happen? So what this does is it clears up the origin story of the JLA. It's there to explain where everything kind of came from, and to set
yeah,
that right, and explain why those characters were important, even though they've kind of gone. They're still a part of history.
yes. And what's cool about the book as well is that they were two characters who at the time were off the table because they were dead or whatever, however you want to look at it. Martian Manhunter is always kind of the fan favorite, but he's not the big three. So
Yeah.
you got two characters that are not on the table in the regular continuity. The other two that you always make fun of, and then the girl that's in the group is not Wonder Woman, who's
No.
this Amazonian princess. It's this girl who can scream really loud and can kick ass with Dinah Lance or Black Canary, which I
Yeah.
love Black
I love
Canary.
Black Canary, man.
Instead of it being Dinah and that's just, her usual beau, which would be Green Arrow,
Mm.
who makes cameos throughout the story, she's caught in different emotional love triangles that you've never even considered.
I don't remember
It's
that.
like, huh, exactly. And you're just like, that's an interesting sort of love interest potentially that never was,
Hmm.
thankfully. And just seeing even like Aquaman, literally a fish out of water, where they say there's times, spoilers in the book, where they say to him like, you've got a weird accent and we can't hear you. Like, can you adjust your volume and the way that you speak? So there's moments in the book where Aquaman is learning how to enunciate words so that
Because he's
people
not in the
understand him.
water.
Yeah, and you're just like, that's
Ah,
interesting.
that's
Like stuff,
clever.
yeah, clever little things like that. So JLA year one, check it out. It's an easy to jumping on point, and you're gonna get a full story.
I am equally, for my number 3, going to jump into the DC Universe. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's now, I am doing this from memory. I was hoping to reread this at the weekend, but it's just been a bit of a busy time. So this is Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. Who killed Jimmy Olsen? This is by Matt Fraction, Steve Lieber, and Nathan Fairbairn. There is admittedly a prologue story that appears in Superman Leviathan Rising special #1. But I mean, if you buy the trade, it's included in the trade. And this is what I like about it. Look at it. In a 12 issue trade, you get a nice, decent size, chunky enough book, right? But this really harks back to the Silver Age a lot. The old Silver Age comics had Jimmy Olsen turn into a turtle or turn into whatever it was, and some weird thing would happen, and he can contact Superman with his watch, and it's just pure silliness. And instead of kind of subtly referencing it or trying to make it make sense, they just do that. They just lean into the silly. But then on top of that, you still get just a really great story. And it's
That's
just,
right.
it's a genuinely funny book. Like, Matt Fraction's writing in this is hilarious, but it also delves into the history of Jimmy Olsen's family and why the Olsens are important to Metropolis, and the history between the Olsens and the Luthers. This delves into the past in a very literal sense, like with that story element. It delves into the past in terms of referencing Silver Age comics, but it feels very, very current, and it's incredibly entertaining, very, very funny, and I wish I'd read it again at the weekend because I absolutely loved it the first time, and I can't imagine I won't love it the second time. So I'm looking forward to reading this again soon. But this is comics gold. This is like that. It's one of those things where you kind of go, okay, would a new fan understand that? I think knowing that it references the Silver Age quite heavily and explaining what that is might help. I'd wonder what a completely new reader might make of something like this. But you never know. They may love it. They may not. They might just go, what the
That's an interesting point. I would say no, but then on second thought, I would say it's also written in a comic strip sort of format where there's just like these little short vignettes, little short
Yes.
stories that within an issue that all kind of come together in a whole. It's the way it really all comes together by the end with all the elements you mentioned. That was a pleasant surprise. I'll admit, while I read it, I was having a hard time. I'm like, is this whole book gonna be like weird like this? And there were moments where I'm like, well, that's clever. I get that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. Then there were times where I'm just like, okay, this whole book, I just gotta finish it. It all comes really well
It
together.
does come well together. You're right. And it has, I think, that anthology feel again. It's a reference to the old Silver Age stories where you get like 2, 3 stories in a comic. So yes, that's very much
Yeah.
the style. They lean heavily into the style as well as the kinds of stories you get, but also throw in all this other stuff. There's tons.
So the next one is a well documented, very celebrated, award winning maxi series. No pun intended, but I will intend that pun. Arguably, the king of maxi series is Tom King himself, and I picked the Vision.
Oh.
I think this was the book that really got Tom King sort of that. What do you want to work on? What characters do you want? You want to work on Batman? Like these were the stepping stones that got him those jobs. And I gotta say, like the type of character that the Vision is in today's modern world, from when this book came out to where we are now, and we kind of think of the way technology is, and cell phones and surveillance and all the different things that come along with AI,
Yeah.
and you're reading this story about a Synthezoid AI family that I didn't really understand it all the time. I always wondered, like, how are him and Wanda together? But apparently, he's got a human
Wang.
anatomy body. Yeah, like it's all of those things are talked about
Are they?
throughout this
I
book.
don't remember
Yeah,
that bit.
yeah,
I'd
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that bit. I would have thought.
You would think, right? But there are
It's my
so
area.
this exploration of his own sort of, no, I don't want to say PTSD, but that desire for life that he has, for family, for normalcy, for acceptance, understanding the behaviors of people around him, the love that gets lost with, like, he's just trying to recreate what he had with Wanda. It's like
Yeah.
it's if you saw WandaVision, there's definitely elements from that show to that you could pull from this book, kind of in a reverse format, in the sense
Yeah.
of like that home living, everything is normal, just go along with it, just go along with what's going on, everything will be fine. But in this case, it's more the Vision who's like
The
telling
center of it.
everybody, just,
Yeah.
yeah. And if Vision loses it, how dangerous could it be?
So,
What's happening in the Omniverse?
well, it's funny you should ask. New to the Omniverse, we have the X Universe reading order. So it is the X-Men's corner of the Marvel Universe, but not just an X-Men reading order. It's all the ancillary mutant characters, a lot of the villains. It also includes the first appearances of characters like Captain Britain and Betsy Braddock, who becomes Psylocke later on. There's a ton of X-Men stuff in this thing. Events and crossovers. We have Fall of the Hulks, with Red Hulk, Green Hulk, Scar, the She-Hulks, all these different Hulks smashing the crap out of each other, followed by the World War Hulks reading order. So it's the end of that event. Essentially, that's one major event, but it's split into two small events. There is an overlap, and if you're kind of going, but yeah, but where's the overlap? Don't worry. There's another reading order coming that's going to help put all those different storylines into one thing.
I almost felt ticklish as you did. Don't you worry about it.
Still building towards the Green Lantern reading order, part 1. We have Rage of the Red Lanterns, which kind of wraps out the period of time that first one's going to cover. There are also updates to Event Leviathan, the Brian Michael Bendis Superman event, and JL Ape, because, who doesn't want to read that desperately? Podcast and video. We've got the Top 10 Cover Artists episode, which features 10 of our favourite cover artists of all time. And we've also got the incoming episode for June 2024. And as a subscriber exclusive, Who's Who Surviving the DC Universe, our second entry in that series, The Demons 3. Who? Who? Hop on and find out. I can't say their actual names because there's Ghast, Wrath, and Abnezaga, and I typed it wrong so many times I was doing it. I had to keep going back and correcting it because the spell checker's just going, what the f*** are you typing? I don't know. You're giving me a panic attack.
Dave, it's your turn, number 3.
Oh, I'm going into Dark Horse territory. I hadn't read this series before. I've wanted to read it for a while, and I kind of made reference to it a couple of weeks ago on our Top 10 Cover Artist episode. This is Rebels. It's by Brian Wood, who I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. His stuff is quite serious. I mean, he's a bit of a controversial figure at the minute. I'll let you look up on Wikipedia as to why. But it's with Andrea Muti as well. The covers of the series were by Chulalote, which was why it was mentioned the other week. Love Chulalote, and it was her art, even though, when you buy it in a trade paperback, you kind of go, I'm buying it for the cover artist, but I'm not buying the single issue. Like, how does that work? But I love her art so much. So it's a historical piece. So the only other one I think we've talked about this historical piece on this show would be Fred Kennedy's Dead Romans. But this is all set during I always get the wars wrong. It's the War of Independence. So many wars to choose from. It's the War of Independence from around the 1700s in the America, where they're fighting the hated British, dirty, dirty British bastards, trying to get them out of America. Oh, they're scum, aren't they? God save the Queen, or whoever it was at the time. I don't know. I don't know my history. Fuck that. But it's a 10-issue series, but it is broken up, so it becomes a bit of an anthology. So the first 6 issues are centered around 2 particular characters. One main male character and the effects of the war on his wife. And then as you go through, it starts to look at some of the other characters, but it starts to come back around again to referring back to that character we met at the beginning. So there's, a bit of an anthology vibe. It focuses on a few different people from different sides of the war. It doesn't matter which side it focuses on. The British are always scum. I nearly didn't include this, and it's partly because the first 6 issues, they're good, but it is it's very serious. You're not going to get any laughs here. It's a nice piece, and you do learn some stuff. And the characters he's chosen, they're not real people. He's created a character for the series who interacts with some quite famous names, like the famous guy of the time, Lord who was a key figure in the war, along with Nelson Samana. So I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from reading this book. 10 issues. There is a follow-up series, and I've lost the book. Oh, it's here. And it's called Rebels, These Free and Independent States. I haven't read this. This is I think it's 6 issues. So, hey, you know what? That might end up making its way into a different list at some point. But I think this focuses is a kind of spiritual continuation of this series. But as a standalone 10 issues, this is a standalone 10-issue series. You might learn some stuff like I did. All those names I've been able to reel off. And you get a bit of a take on a historical bit of American history.
Nice. It's an interesting choice because My next choice was also inspired by our top 10 cover artists
Ooh.
episode,
Oh.
and that is Camelot 3000.
Oh, wow. Did you happen to
From
have that?
I happen to have that on my shelf.
Is that the deluxe?
I
Sorry, I'm really
It is the
excited. I nearly
yeah,
got the deluxe recently and I passed on it and I'm regretting it.
it's the deluxe.
Oh, you little trickster.
Yeah, I found it a couple of copies actually at Comic-Con a couple years ago that it's like 15, $20 in like a bargain bin. I'm always interested when they make something deluxe. I'm always like, they made it a deluxe for a reason,
Mm.
right? This thing's been around for a long time. Brian Bolland, art, right? Classic. Mike W. Barr of that time, he was an editor at DC, and then he wanted to write this story, so he got off as an editor and became a writer, was doing Batman and the Outsiders at the same time. This
Huh.
is the Knights of the Round Table reincarnated in the year 3000, and it's a sci-fi epic with Morgan Le Fay and all the usual villains and suspects, and it gets right into it. There's a lot of things that require you to have like that suspension of disbelief, but the way this is written, it like you're thrust into like King Arthur is back after the first issue. Comics were different back then. They told a lot of story. If there's 12 issues, there's going to be quite a bit of story told. So you
Yeah.
go for the Holy Grail in this, and you find yourself fighting in space, and you've got, the team connecting again, and then also all the drama that is connected to King Arthur legend with his wife and betrayal and yada yada yada. It's all dealt with again in this book. It almost didn't make my list halfway through, just like your choice didn't.
Uh-huh.
But I stuck with it, one, because the art is beautiful,
Is it
and
him throughout? No,
it's
no one
him through
else.
no one else.
Hmm.
Every page is him. This was in 1983, 84, and so he was really taking chances at that time with certain elements of like Sir Tristan was reincarnated as a woman. Throughout the entire story, it's this frustration of being in the wrong body, which if you read
Oh, I
it today,
see.
right, reading it today might have, an audience relate to it.
Yeah.
But at the time, there was a lot of things that he was doing in this book that were not Comics Code approved. So he was like, screw it. Let's go balls to the walls, whatever we can get away
Or
with
not.
or not. But let's do what we can and be risque. And I think this was one of the first, I don't quote me, but one of the first direct market maxi series that had that sort of Baxter, that special
Ah,
stock
yeah.
to it. So it was given like a little bit of a premium presentation from the beginning. And the Brian Boland art is a lot of fun. And the cool thing, sorry, I'm ranting on it, but
No,
the cool thing
go for it.
about it is that it has because they're 12 issue maxi series, there's a little bit more at stake,
Oh,
right? So
it has time to
so
build the
you don't
story.
time to build a story, but things can happen,
Hmm.
right? There's consequences, there are casualties, there's sacrifices, because it's not going to be 100 issues where these characters need to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
He's telling his story, and that's what it is. This is the story of Camelot 3000. So give it a try. Keep in mind it is written from 1983. It's not quite as dialogue heavy as I would have imagined it to
Oh,
be. It's very fast moving, very fast paced, but it's entertaining. And again, Brian Bolland can't speak highly enough about it. His covers are great, and so is his sci-fi. Your number 4.
my number 4. It's from Valiant, who are getting quite a lot of mentions again from us recently.
Love Valiant.
12-issue series. It's called Ivar Time Walker. This does something that reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine. I was talking to Pete one day
Beware.
about time travel stuff. And I was saying, yeah, but that's not how time travel works. We're talking about a story. I'm like, that's not how time travel works. And he went, okay, how does time travel work? And I went, like this. And he went, according to what? What rules? Because in this film, oh, people have this set thing of rules of like how time travel categorically will and won't work because of all
Right.
the fictional stuff they've read or watched or whatever it is. Ivar Time Walker takes that on board, and it goes, yeah, no, that's not how. No, that's not
I
how
have
that
to
works.
reread
You
that. I
watch too
have to
many
reread
films.
that.
Ivar is one of the 3 immortal brothers in the Valiant universe. There's Armstrong, part of Archer and Armstrong. the super strong one who's just been drinking for however long they've been alive. There's the
They're like the Vandal Savages of
they essentially are like a Vandal
right.
Savage brothers.
Yeah.
There's the Eternal Warrior, and he just fights
Yes.
in every single war in history. And then there's Ivar, who is a time walker, so he can do exactly that. He can travel through time, and it explains a lot of like how he got started and what his role is in the universe. Well, he finds someone who's about to discover time travel, and then he's trying to stop her from doing it because it changes the course of human history. He's trying to stop her from making a mistake, and then she
Right.
trusts him and goes with him. And then as it goes on, you're starting to question how much of what Ivar says is even true.
Mm.
So what is his real deal? What is the situation? How does he know so much about her? And he
Mm.
drops little hints. And then so it's kind of told in 4-issue chunks in many ways. So it
Yes.
was originally released
Yes.
as it was originally released as 12 issues. They collected it as 3 4-issue trade paperbacks. So it's kind of chapterized in that way. And each chapter does cover it takes a very different turn as it goes through. So whatever you think you're going to get from this time travel story, you're not. It's going to surprise you. The art is fantastic. So it's written by Fred Van Lente, who writes Archer and Armstrong, which was one of my favorite Valiant titles, possibly my number one favorite Valiant title as it took over from Exo. The art is by Clayton Henry, who I'm a massive fan of. I really, really love his stuff. There's Francis Portela, Carl Kiesel. Is it Kiesel? That's all
Carl
right.
Kessel.
Thank you. There's Perry Perez. Just a great team. It's a great story, and it's funny as well. Archer and Armstrong is one of the funnier titles from Valiant. It is very much a comedy book. It's also quite subversive. This isn't quite as subversive as that series, but it's still got the humor in it, and it goes like, whatever you think about time travel, what the rules are, you're wrong. Cut it out. Come over here. We're going to do it a different way. And I love it. It's the second time I've read it. I was so glad I got to read
I
it
gotta
again.
reread that. Thank you for mentioning that and for reminding me to give it another look. That's great.
No worries. Yeah, that's Ivar Time Walker. And again, it was another one of your recommendations. I think you mentioned it before I even got to read it.
I'm happy that it came through for you. To
Yeah.
answer me, Trunk's question, it can be read as a standalone. The good thing about Valiant is that the majority, I would say, almost any title can be read standalone.
Yeah.
It'll and when a character steps in from another book or where from the Valiant universe, you'll just be interested enough in them to want to read what's happening in their world. But Ivar
Yeah.
the Time Walker, you don't have to read anything else in the Valiant universe.
No, I've done both. I've read it without knowing, and I loved it. And I read it again recently, knowing. And then it's like, so it adds to the experience,
Of course. But that's a good comic, right?
That's a
Is that
good
you
comic.
could read it because that book is a stepping stone to who's his brothers? Archer and Armstrong, the Eternal
Yeah.
Warrior, what are they about? And then from there you're like, oh, read
Yeah.
it again, it's even better.
If you
So good.
do want to read some other stuff beforehand, read Archer and Armstrong first, 25 issues and done, and then read that. Or you can just read it on its own.
All right.
Your number
Number 5.
5.
I don't even know if you like this series. What do you think it is?
I think it's. Is it a DC?
No,
Is it a Marvel?
it's a Marvel. It is a Marvel. Any guesses from the
No.
audience? You're gonna be like, you might be like, oh God, I don't want to talk about this one. But to me, when I think of Maxi-Series,
It's not Avengers. It's not an Avengers book, is it?
no. When it's a book that I hadn't read. I always meant to read it. I think of Maxi-Series, and this is the book that comes to my head. Pre-Watchmen, pre-Marvels, pre-Kingdom Come. It's the Squadron Supreme.
No, I wouldn't have guessed that.
I tried to read it a couple years ago. I got
Right.
8 issues deep,
And what happened?
and I put it down, read something else just for a break because this book is the wordiest comic I have ever read in my life. It is verbose.
Yes.
Oh, I'll ask you. Have you read it? Did you like
I've
it?
read
If
it
you have,
twice. So I read it in singles a long time ago, and I didn't warm to it, but I had to reread it for the Marvel Comics Guide because technically it counts as a crossover because of the Captain America issue.
Captain
But if you don't
America,
read the Captain America issue, you don't really lose or gain anything. So
just motive.
yeah, so you can read it without. So it still stands as a 12-issue series just fine. So it doesn't break the rules. Um, so yes, I struggled both times, and I didn't want to struggle because it's Mark Grunwald's. and that's him at his peak with Captain America, which is why it
Yeah.
crossed over with Captain America. I don't dislike it. I just didn't necessarily fall into it very easily, and I got through so I could update the Marvel Comics guide and get it done. But it wasn't necessarily the most fun I'd had reading a series, partly because it felt so verbose, like you say.
Yeah. I read it in just under a week. Takes time. Each issue takes time. But
Yeah.
I will say this. It came before a lot of other things that get a ton of credit. And this series, what Mark Gruenwald does here predates Injustice. All the things that
Mm.
we think are so cool about the what if the Justice League went bad?
Yeah.
What if the heroes fought each other in a civil war?
Yeah.
What if they did something to a fellow teammate that was identity crisis like?
Yeah.
Everything that they built entire series out of in years to come,
Single
he does it
concepts.
first.
Yeah.
He does it first here.
He does it first, and he does all of it.
He does all of it. And he does it in a way for that, and that's what for me it was like everything that people stretched out into omnibus level storytelling for one issue or one matter. And what's crazy about it is that it's written in the it's almost like a 1984 of comics. Like Watchmen is kind of like that too, but in this case, it's like, what if the powers that be say, we know what's right for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a chance. Listen to us. We'll give you utopia. That's literally what they're trying to do. The Justice League is saying, we're going to give you utopia. Kind of
Yeah.
like the Injustice video game.
Yeah.
But they still think they're the heroes. They're not just like we're the authority.
Well, yeah.
Another example.
Yeah.
Of
I was, funny enough, was going to say it trumps the authority by 15
right.
years.
You've got the ultimates, the authority, so many different things that pull, I feel, from what Mark Gruenwald was exploring in this book. Even dimension hopping,
Mm-hmm.
fighting alternate versions of the multiverse is explored. It's wild.
Yeah. A ton happens. And it takes place over the course of a full year. So it's a 12-issue series.
Year.
And because it's not set in the 616 mainstream Marvel universe, they're able to tell it over an extended period of time. So it is a full year story. So the Squadron Supreme hadn't appeared for a little while at that point. I can't remember when they appeared before. It might even have been like the late 70s. So there's room to play with time.
Yeah.
And he
it's
he
a pastiche.
He has the freedom.
Yeah. And it's the first time, I shouldn't say that. I don't know if it's the first time that these themes were being explored, because they must have been in other stories here, there, perhaps. But this is a more focused, what if we really established gun control and we had our speedster just run through the country and just collect everybody's guns?
Yeah.
No more violence. Instead, we'll give you this. That's better, right? That's better. And the people who push back, that are the bad guys, that are oftentimes today considered the bad guys, when you read certain stories in certain contexts, you're just like, oh, so what is the right thing to do?
Why is it wrong?
Right?
Is
Why
it wrong?
Is it wrong to do that? When the rebels fight back to overthrow and say, we've got to restore freedom that you've stolen from people.
Yeah.
Where are they willing to let their conscience and their morality take them for the greater good? This is so campy at some points, but it's so good. And I think Mark Gruenwald is really, really good at taking these ridiculously dressed characters like a Captain America and the Captain, or in this case, the Squadron Supreme, and telling some really serious storytelling.
Well, yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know who the Squadron Supreme are, they are a kind of a parody of sorts of the Justice League. And they were introduced in a time travel story that included Kang. That over time, they had them appear again and again, and they would have a few more members that are based on the Justice League. So all the characters are based on the Justice League. But it was an opportunity to have the Avengers fight the Justice League sporadically. But that was about it. And then this went, what if the Justice League did this? Which was a very different approach to how they've been used before. And then it allowed the room to tell that story. Whereas if he went to DC, that would have to be an Elseworlds story. And Elseworlds didn't exist at that point.
No. And this, like you said, it counts in Marvel continuity.
Yeah, it's part of their multiverse. Yeah.
It's part of their multiverse. And this weird No, but this copy is the first printing of Squadron Supreme.
Uh-huh.
So it's got Mark Gruenwald's ashes
It,
in the printing.
it cut the sound cut, and it basically said it's got Mark Grunwald's ass.
Ashes. Part of his ass is in the
Part,
ashes,
quite
so
possibly, yeah. Well, quite possibly,
right?
they will be in there. Yeah, part of his ashes are in that printing. Yeah, it's in the ink, isn't
In
it?
this printing. It's in the ink, yeah,
Mm.
because it was part of his will to
Yeah,
say that please do that because that book meant so much to him.
yeah.
So I think it's groundbreaking. Is it the greatest of its kind? There's been so many explorations of what he did here, modernized versions.
Mm.
Watchmen came out a year later. You can't talk about Watchmen without people saying it's the greatest thing of all time. But I think that this is. I wanted to put this when I read it. I'm like, should this be a hidden gem? Because it's not really a hidden gem, but
Well,
it's not. It doesn't get enough of the accolades I feel it deserves.
it's
And
very
when it
often
comes to
forgotten.
Maxi, yes, and when it comes to Maxi series, just the cover, I always remember seeing single issues of it. It has a little banner, 12 issue Maxi
Yeah,
series, Squadron Supreme.
yeah.
So that's what makes me think of like when I think of this book, it's like that's a 12 issue Maxi series. That's
Really
what that
nice.
was.
This is, I genuinely think this is my favorite post 2000. This is my favorite 2000s Marvel title, still, even now. I've read this series about 5 or 6 times,
Okay.
and I absolutely
Oh, I
love
know
it.
what it is.
You know
I
what it
know what it
is?
is.
What is it?
Next Wave.
Yes. So Next Wave is a really oddball series. It's got 5 main characters. There's the captain, who's been known as various different captains over time. He got punched in the face once by Captain America because he introduced himself as Captain. There's Boom Boom from X-Force. There's Monica Rambeau, who used to be Captain Marvel. She was the second Captain Marvel. Machine Man is in it, but it was later revealed that it's not technically. This is technically his first appearance, this version. And Elsa Bloodstone. So some people might know Elsa Bloodstone from the Werewolf by Night Marvel black and white one-shot episode thing on Disney Plus. She's a very different character from the Elsa Bloodstone we get here, but Elsa Bloodstone was introduced a few years before in her own miniseries as the daughter of Ulysses Bloodstone, the adventurer from the 1970s kind of pulp Marvel magazines. She's an explorer and monster hunter. But in this, she's got different coloured hair and a whole different attitude and everything. So that was a Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning written series, I think. And this is by Warren Ellis, written by Warren Ellis. The art is by Stuart Immonen, and I love Stuart Immonen's art so much.
Never read this series and I want to read it so bad now.
It's brilliant. It's completely anarchic. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon that would be banned because it's just not appropriate for kids. It's still a code-approved series, or the equivalent. So it's not a mature reader's title, but it is just random and very dark humor because it's Warren Ellis. So it's incredibly dark humor. But they will literally fight bombs made of koalas, and they've got mindless ones on skateboards. And it's all these 2-issue series. So it's 6 two-parters each storyline. And in theory, it could have gone on past 12 issues, but it wasn't selling enough. Like, what Marvel weren't selling enough copies for it to go past 12 issues. So it's not,
Mm,
in many ways, it's not technically a maxi series, just ended at 12 issues
it's a
with a
canceled
proper ending.
series.
Technically, it's a cancelled series, but it has a proper ending. And I don't see that it needed to go further. I like that it stops where it does, and that's the end of it. But it's been referenced a lot since, but you still get a lot of people that haven't read it. But it's complete anarchy. Machine Man in it is obsessed with Elsa Bloodstone's chest, and it really annoys her. Monica Rambeau's memories of being in the Avengers are very different to the way that we remember her being in the Avengers. So it plays with history a bit, but to me, it doesn't matter. As a continuity obsessed person of that time, which is around about 2006 when it came out, it didn't bother me that it's kind of had these little flashback nuggets of them rewriting history. Like, that's not how it happened. Didn't care. It was just too funny. It's too entertaining. And when you get to the end and you see the big boss, it's like, this is just the most beautifully obscure stuff that you're throwing in here. So there's a load of random new stuff, but you'll also get a load of references to old school Marvel, especially 1970s Marvel. The guy who's running the team, so they're part of Hate, and the guy who's the agents of Hate. So the guy who's running it is supposed to be Nick Fury, but they were told they couldn't use Nick Fury in the end, so he switched him out for a new character called Dirk Anger. And the whole way through, Dirk Anger is getting gradually more depressed. And this is kind of partly what makes it not appropriate for kids, as he's finding more and more elaborate ways to attempt suicide. It's got very, very dark stuff in it, but I love this. This is my level of dark. There's kind of rude humor, but it's smart. There's dumb humor, but it's still got a cleverness to it. And Fin Fang Foom is in it. Like, that's an immediate win for me. But it has Machine Man versus Fin Fang Foom. Like, I need 12 copies, please, of just that. That's great. I cannot praise this series enough just for being pure goddamn fun. There's an amazing bit as well towards the end of the series, which I'd forgotten about, which has tons and tons of double page spreads. If you turn the page, it's another double page spread to them fighting stuff through corridors. And it just gets more and more random. And some of it with no real explanation. You're just going, where are you thinking of this from? It's great. And every time it introduces Next Wave, it gives the little blurb they used to do at the end. They go like, Amazing Spider-Man, bit by radioactive spider, blah, 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 blah. In this, it's different every time. And all of there's constant jokes. There's so many throwaway jokes in this, even in things like that and single panels. And it's almost like The Invisibles. The Invisibles has 1,000 ideas on a page. This is like 1,000 jokes on a page, and some of them are hidden, and you don't notice them the first time. Next Wave is brilliant. A part of me is sad that it ended where it did, because there was a point where it might not have done. But I like that we've got 12 great issues, and it never had that thing where it ran on further and kind of petered out. Or they switched artists because that was they couldn't afford Stuart Immonen anymore. He's too expensive for a series that wasn't selling. So originally when they released it as well, they kind of did a lot of the launch stuff on MySpace, because it was that part of human history, and it had its own theme tune as if it was a Saturday morning cartoon. It's become a cult classic. So if you haven't tapped into it yet, tap.
I think that's a pretty definitive list of Maxi-Series we gave him, Dave.
I think it is, dude.
I gotta say.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
Nice job, man. Nice job. And again, with the little surprise bits. I guess none of yours in the end.
I love it. That's also why I was excited, because I'm like, Dave, there's nothing obvious this time.
I may have written a couple down that I thought you were going to have, because it saves me writing. It's like,
they were on my backup list.
I had to delete them all.
They were on the backup list, but maybe next time.
I don't know. That's any time. I did have a backup as well, so that must mean we've got the potential for a follow-up.
Perhaps. Well, as always, I had a ton of fun, and I want to buy a bunch of comics that I don't have or haven't read yet. Well, everybody that was with us on Twitch, as always, we love you. Thank you for coming out. God bless you. Thank you for the shout-outs, BC Scrubs every week, and all the support everyone gives us. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on YouTube and all your other podcast platforms that you might be listening on, Spotify, Apple. You're listening on your way to work, while you're cleaning your house, whatever the case may be. Thank you for tuning in. Give us a review. We appreciate it, and we've been getting some pretty kind words from people, and we
it's been really
are
sweet.
just happy that the listeners and the viewers are enjoying our recommendations, right? That we're trying to give people fun things to read and look for when they go to their bookstores or comic shops.
Too right, mate.
Right? All right. Dave, as always, bid you adieu. A pleasure.
Adieu, sir. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.